Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Brad. How you doing this fine morning?
I'm doing good. I'm going to go camping in the backyard with my kids tonight, so I'm really excited for that. They're really excited for it. It's going to be a good time. What about you? How you doing?
Well, it's a little bittersweet, the fact that we're actually recording this morning, because right now I should be in New Hampshire hiking Franconia Ridge, but the weather did not look that great. And to add insult to injury, I checked it this morning, and guess where it's not raining today?
Of course.
So I knew it was one of those things where with the information I had, if I decided to go up, it was going to rain all weekend, and if I stayed home, it wouldn't. So
yeah, that's a big enough commitment with how many hours away it is. That
it was at least a 6.5 hour drive, so it wasn't worth the risk. So, anyways, I'll get some fish in there or something down here this weekend. It'll be good. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that came up last night in a post that I saw online. The group leader was talking to some of the members of the group about why it's so difficult for fathers to get into shape. And while this discussion isn't going to be necessarily a fitness-related journey, I want to talk to you about the idea of self-prioritization. Because a lot of the answers that I saw to this question were about how the kids come first and I don't have any time and I'm spending time with my kids, watching TV, or I'm, it's my time is not my own anymore, was kind of the overall gist. So I want to start the conversation about why it's important for men to prioritize themselves and what that looks like and the benefits of it. I will let me throw it over to you to get your initial thoughts, and then we can start to dig into it.
Yeah. So prioritizing time for yourself is important in so many ways. Because you look at so many men who don't have things put together. They are lonely. They are out of shape. The only activity that they participate in is catching up on the latest show on Netflix. Those are things that aren't really going to move the needle as a husband, a father, as a man. The things that make us the men that we are, the things that men need to be in their lives involve getting outdoors, really spending time reading good books and making themselves better, focusing on building a business, learning skills, hobbies, valuable traits that will make you the best man possible. Working out is obviously very important as well, as we talk about often here. But those are the things that are so important for us to be able to develop, to be able to hone, and to be able to master. And by really spending some time working on ourselves, those things are achievable. But then the question becomes, why do men think that those things aren't achievable? Why, Dan, do men think that? Why? Like, what's the impetus behind why we can't prioritize ourselves? What do men tell themselves?
My belief is that men in general feel a need to be to put themselves second, to put themselves as a secondary thought to the overall picture, whether it be work, home, marriage, kids, whatever it is. The concept is that, and I know I fell into it a lot, was that if I'm spending time at the gym or at the archery range or out hunting and fishing or whatever activity I'm doing that's bettering myself, reading, even, I've mentioned before that I'm going back to school for my MBA, studying and doing work for that. If I'm spending time away from my other duties, then I'm being selfish. And we were always taught that being selfish is wrong, is bad. The problem is it's not, because those are activities that make us better men. They solidify us. They build up our strengths. They create the ability within us to make better decisions, to grow better personal empires, whether it's a business or a family or just your mindset in general. But the concept of it being selfish and being at the expense of others is something that a lot of men fight with on a daily basis.
So I want to dive into this concept of selfishness and why we feel so damn selfish when it comes to making time for ourselves and prioritizing ourselves. And if you take a step back, I think most men, the reason they feel that way makes a lot of sense. Right? As men, most of us are married, most of us have kids. And what that usually means is that we are tasked with the burden of being the breadwinner, to provide for our family. And that's a burden that we gladly and cheerfully accept. I think most men obviously are in the same boat there. But what that also means is that your wife is probably the one staying home with the kids. If not, she's working, but there's a babysitter involved or something, or they're in school. And then you work. You get up in the morning, you go to work, you get there by 8. You're not done until 5. Sometimes if you're commuting to the office, you're not getting home until maybe 6. So you get home, have dinner with your family, spend a couple of hours with them. Everybody goes to bed, rinse, repeat. So as men, it's very easy to become conditioned that the window that I have to spend with my family is those few precious hours at night. And so all those things that you want to do, you inherently start to feel selfish for because you're spending so much time away from home. So it's really easy for men to fall into that trap of, I have 3-4 hours with my family every night. I'm going to make sure that I prioritize them. Maybe I can do something after they go to bed. And then once everybody goes to bed, you spend some time with your wife. You're too tired, so you just turn something on Netflix, call it a day, rinse, repeat. And inherently, that doesn't seem bad, right? We want to spend time with our family. But this idea of selfishness of thinking, well, I can't go out on the weekend. I can't go spend some time with my buddies going on a hike. I can't go spend some time at the archery range. I can't go shoot my gun because my wife spent all week home with the kids. She needs to be able to go do something. I selfishly chose to. So you feel almost selfish. You feel almost as if you haven't earned that right because you look at what she's gone through and what your kids are going through. When in reality, all of that's crap. Yes, it's absolutely vital and crucial that we prioritize our family. But at the same time, this complete choosing of deprioritizing ourselves ends up being incredibly detrimental to those people that we love, that we think that we're providing for and trying to be there for. Am I off base on that one?
So the last part of that, right, where you said that we think it becomes detrimental to the people who rely on us. Why? Dig into that a little bit more.
So yeah, ultimately it's detrimental for those that we love because we think that not spending time with them is somehow going to affect them negatively. It could be tied to past trauma with our own parents. It could be tied to various stories that we've read. But this idea that I'm not there in the moment for my kids, or I'm not available for my wife, is something that I think men tell themselves that ends up becoming a tremendous detriment. Does that make sense? I mean, I'd love to see what you're thinking.
It does. It does. From personal experience, I can say that I absolutely believed that, removing myself from the family, from the presence of my wife and kids, was going to be a detriment to them, and that I wasn't going to be spending time with them. I was going to maybe miss some key moments, especially when the kids were little and going through all those little, firsts. I thought that it was just plain selfish, that I was doing stuff by myself that I wanted to do that, the kids weren't able to do, and maybe my wife didn't want to do, and my wife wasn't being allowed to necessarily do that. But I also realized that if my wife had ever come to me and said, hey, I want to go on a girls' weekend or something like that, I'd be the first one cheering her on and saying, go, you deserve it. Get away, relax. And what I've learned over time is that concept of absence makes the heart grow fonder is actually really true. And it serves both parties. It serves the wife and the kids in that they appreciate what you bring to the table more because you're not there. And they say, oh, dad actually is the one who does this, this, and this. And when he's not here, it doesn't get maybe done the right way, or we have trouble, or whatever that looks like. And then on the other side, when you're removed from the situation, you remove that, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but like when you're with your family all the time and everyone's on top of each other, it's like, I love you all, and you're all driving me nuts right now. So you kind of build that distance where you can go back and you can re-engage a stronger, saner, more powerful man. And it depends too on the activities that you're doing, right? I talked about this a little bit earlier. Like if you're just going out to the bar and going out to the strip club and doing all that stuff, like this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about stuff that's going to grow you as a man, whether that's physical activity on the daily basis, whether that's, a guy's hunting trip, or, for instance, I have been running a snowboard trip with my group of friends for the last 25 years. It's a 3, 4, 5 days a year where we all get together. It's just the guys for the most part. We go away, we snowboard, we hang out, we bond, and then we all kind of go back to our families, and it's a total mental reset for me. I'm allowed to kind of go and be with my group, and we've talked about the power of a group, the power of a clan before, and then I'm able to re-engage with my family, a stronger, saner, better man. My wife will be the first one to tell you that I need those trips. I need that time away. I need that self-prioritization, even to the point where during the week, she'll look at me and be like, if I'm being lazy and I skip the gym a couple of days, she'll look at me and be like, you need to get your ass to the gym. You need to go work out. Not because you're becoming a fat ass, but because you're becoming an asshole. and it's literally just that time to spend on myself, which helps me re-engage better with the family. It helps you appreciate that time that you have with your people more when you're a little bit removed from them, and when you're able to spend time on yourself. And I think part of it comes down to, there's that selfishness, and then there's also jealousy, right? And it's almost, that jealousy is almost, to me, a covert contract, in that when I don't get to spend time doing the things that I want to do that make me a better man, I get very jealous of the situation. I get very frustrated that I'm not allowed to kind of go do the things that I need to do. I get frustrated with the family. I get frustrated with the situation. And I know that little bit of disengagement will make my re-engagement even stronger. So that's a lot of babbling about it, but it's really about kind of that last piece, right? You need to sometimes disengage to re-engage stronger.
Yeah, that concept of re-engaging is huge. Because when you scale back and look at the prioritization of self, that in so many ways is getting your head right? Like when you focus on yourself, you're not focusing on those natural man desires. Like you said, you're not going to the bar, you're not going to the strip club, you're not just going to smoke a bowl and do nothing, right? You're actually going to be doing things that will move the needle. And with that allows you to calibrate yourself and calibrate your mind. As you were talking about, it helps you get things right so that when you are able to be there for your family, you can re-engage. Being calibrated as an individual and as a man is huge. It gets you in the place that you need to be able to execute. And that doesn't always necessarily mean that you have to go on, a trip with your buddies. You don't need to go away for a few days. Yeah, those things are great. Those things are necessary. But oftentimes this calibration and this opportunity for re-engagement can be in smaller settings too. That can be something as simple as making time for yourself daily to go to the gym, making time for yourself daily to read a book, making time daily for yourself to work on that business idea that's been jangling around in the back of your head for the last 5 years. By intentionally setting aside time for yourself every day, that is by default going to enable you to be a better man, because it's going to get your head right. It's going to help you align with your values so that when you do go back to your family, you're going to be able to re-engage. And I actually have a story I want to share it's not just a once. This is something I go through constantly. So in my life, I'm busy, right? As most dads of young kids are. I go to work, obviously, in addition to going to work, I do this podcast. I have a side gig. I participate in the men's group, the Iron Council. I have hobbies, passions, interests. I go to the gym. I go to jiu-jitsu. I do archery. I like riding my bike and going hiking. I like going camping. I like reading. There's a lot of stuff on my plate that I enjoy doing. So for men, we all have these interests, and we're like, how do I juggle all this stuff? How do I keep all this stuff moving while I can still be able to execute on my family? I'll tell you one thing. When I don't do that stuff, when I don't go to jiu-jitsu, when I don't go to the gym, when I don't read, when I don't spend time working on this podcast, I'm not there for my family. I don't feel good because I'm not doing things that move the needle for myself, so that when I'm at home, I'm less present as a husband. I'm less present as a father, because I'm not able to fully re-engage them the way that I need to, because I'm not accomplishing all this stuff that I have set aside for myself to excel in. Does that make sense?
Is that partly because you're thinking about all the things that you want to be doing, or that you're not able to be doing right now?
That could be part of it, right? Like there are times where, I really wanted to go shoot my bow today. I didn't do it, so I'm upset. But other times, there are things that I've identified that I need to do for myself to get myself in a good mental space and a good headspace that I don't do, that I regret. If I don't go to the gym part of the reason for me going to the gym is to get myself into better shape to more fully be there for my kids, to be able to play with them, to run around with them, to jump around with them, to do crazy stuff. If I don't do that, like in some ways, I'm letting them down as well. Yes, I'm letting myself down, but I'm also letting them down. So
I would agree with that. I would agree with that a lot. It's the same for me. Part of it is, and to be perfectly honest, with the canceling this camping trip that I was supposed to be on this weekend, I'm going to probably struggle with it a little bit at times this weekend too. Is thinking about the things that I could be doing away from them that benefit me from a mental standpoint. This trip was what I call nature therapy. Like every once in a while, I just need to get out either by myself or with a small group of people and get out into nature and just kind of enjoy it. And I think a lot of guys are like that in one sense or the other. But by not doing that trip this weekend, I have to more mentally engage myself in the situation at home. And we're talking a lot about home here too, but this whole concept can spread to work. There's a reason why vacation time is provided by most employers, right? It's to get away and to disengage from the work so that you can re-engage a happier employee. Likewise, it's anything. You need to step away from the situations, prioritize yourself, and do the things that you want to do to re-engage. It's a tough concept, but I'm a lot like you, where I am more engaged when I can make the time for myself. If that means getting up early every day to get to the gym, then that means getting up early every day to get to the gym. I fully understand that this conversation is not a ticket to disregard your responsibilities. This conversation is about time management and making sure that you're taking care of yourself and your responsibilities. It's not an or situation. So for instance, and I think you're a lot like me, I have to work out every day. Well, in order to do that, for a long time, I used to have to get up and go before work. My kids are now at the age where they don't necessarily need me as much after work. So I've been starting to phase in some after work workouts and not get up at before the sun every day. But I'm figuring out where in the schedule I can put me in and prioritize myself while not limiting or reducing the scope of my responsibilities. And that's a big thing. The other thing that was coming up while you were talking was when we step away and we prioritize ourselves, it makes the people that we step away from stronger because we are not there and they are not simply allowed to rely on us all the time. We want to be the providers and the protectors in our families, at work, wherever. But those people, and especially our sons, right? We're talking about masculinity here, so we're talking about fathers and sons as part of that conversation. They're not going to learn how to do that work if we're constantly there doing it for them. So by stepping away, it allows the people that we step away from to grow a little bit and to have time to explore those realms. And again, this is not a permission to negate all your responsibilities. It's a conversation about prioritizing yourself and filling your needs as well as the others that are involved in your life.
That's what it's all about. And one thing, as you were talking about, that I think about, and in this message, we want to make sure is abundantly clear, is prioritizing yourself doesn't give you carte blanche to go do whatever the hell you want and disregard your family. You want to go shoot your bow, you want to go to the gym, you want to go hike, you want to go fish, you want to go read a book, you want to go take a cooking class all on the same day. That's not going to work. One of the most important things with the prioritization of yourself is to make sure that your wife is along for the ride, or your significant other, whatever that looks like. She needs to know that, hey, going to the gym is really important for me. I'm going to get up early to do it. There might be days where I need to go later. Or, hey, there's this trip coming up that I really want to go on. You need to make sure that she's on board with this. And you also need to be able to give a little. If there's something that you want to do or something you feel is going to get you right, or whatever that looks like, and she might not be comfortable with it, it's not okay to harbor resentment against her for that, but it is okay to be able to seek compromise. If you want to go on a backpacking trip in Montana, your wife says, nah, I'd rather you not for XYZ. I don't want you to get mauled by a grizzly. We don't have money, whatever. Okay, this is something that's very important to me. What if I do a backpacking trip here locally? There is always a way to meet halfway, but it's vital. It's crucial to incorporate your wife in these conversations?
Yeah, and I can give a real world example of that. Like I mentioned, I go on this snowboard trip every year, and it's something that's actually been in existence since before before I married my wife. I'm not quite sure. I think I met her right around the time it started. But regardless, at the beginning of the year, in the beginning of the upcoming new year, I'm looking at that trip. I was looking at a hunting trip. I've got a trip to Maine in October of this year that I'm looking at. And I've got a couple of other small things that I want to do. Now, these are all things that my family doesn't participate in. And this was a conversation I had with my wife, was that, listen, these are things that center me. These are things that calibrate me, that make me a better man overall. They allow me to be more present when I'm here if I can do these things by myself. And I understand that I have a limited amount of vacation time from work and need to also be present for the family and take the family on vacation and do certain things. So here's everything that I want to do, roughly the time frame that I want to do it. Let's talk about what the family wants to do as well and figure out how we can balance the two. There was definitely give and take. There's a couple of things that I had to either push out for another year or compromise on. I think one of the things is one of the hunting trips that I was looking at. I might have to scrap that and maybe just take a couple extra days off of work and hunt locally. Okay. It's not the big grand adventure that I was looking for, but I'm still going to get some time to center myself, and we're going to prioritize the family and some vacation trips that we're looking at there. So you're right. It's absolutely about getting your people on board, getting your wife, your kids, your boss, wherever the situation is needs that little bit of compromise, getting them on board, explaining to them the situation and why these things are important to you, and then working up a compromise that works for everyone. And believe me when I say that she's even more excited for me to go on these trips now that we've had that conversation, because she doesn't feel like I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I'm going to say she doesn't feel like I'm running away from the family so much as I'm running towards bettering myself so that I can re-engage and be a stronger father and husband.
Yeah. No, that's perfect, man. That's one of those things that we really have to discuss. And one other element of compromise that I was thinking about as you were talking was, we've given a lot of examples of us doing things independent of our families. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go on this trip, or I'm going to go do this or that without them. A lot of times compromise, or even a lot of times just the general prioritization of yourself, can and does and even should include your family. Like, I'll give a couple of examples here. I really wanted to focus on my relationship with God. So I was recommitting to reading my scriptures regularly. My daughter comes up to me and she's like, "Hey, Dad, I want to read the scriptures too." So I was like, okay. When it comes to prioritizing myself and having a relationship with God as part of prioritizing myself, in my opinion, is that scripture reading was my daughter and I. Taking some time, didn't read as much as I might have by myself, but I will tell you what, I sure got way more out of it sharing that experience with my daughter. Mm-hmm. Another example recently was I really wanted to go on a hike for Father's Day. Ideally in the back of my head, I wanted to go on something big that my kids are really not prepared for. But a reasonable and great compromise was, let's do a smaller family hike with my wife and my kids. And it was awesome. Right? It got me right. It helped me feel good. It had us have a really good shared experience. So when we prioritize ourselves, there's a balance. Yes, there are things we should need to do on our own, but there are also things that we should and need to do with our family.
Yeah, the compromise is a big part of it. I mean, we're doing the same thing with, like I mentioned, the snowboarding, and we're booking a family ski trip for the first time this year. Now, one of my daughters will not ski or snowboard, and I don't think my wife will, but we're finding a place that has tubing, that has maybe, I don't know, some of the places here on the East Coast have like indoor water parks, stuff like that they could maybe do while me and the other one are out on the slopes. So it's about that compromise. And you're right, it's not always about getting away. And sometimes you can prioritize yourself and include other people. Sometimes it's a requirement to include other people, but sometimes it's not. You need to get away from one group and be with another group. This is all a balancing act. The idea, though, is to not live a life where you only do the things that other people want you to do. You have to do those things that that move you forward as a man and that you have a desire to do, whether other people want to be involved or not. Because those are the things that are going to grow you into a stronger, more well-rounded, more resilient man.
Yeah, this all comes full circle back to the various excuses and comments you saw in that thread that you were looking through. I don't have time. I've got to take care of my kids. I got to take care of my wife. I have 2 jobs. I have a health ailment. I have an injured foot. You can think of a million excuses as to why we don't prioritize ourselves. And every single one of those is an excuse. And every single one of those excuses is shooting yourself in the foot. How incredibly detrimental is it when you say that you can't focus on yourself because you simply don't have time or something got in the way? You're making your own existence completely miserable by choice. Yeah, it requires some sacrifice. And we just talked about tons of ways in which you make sacrifice, you can prioritize, you can make time. But the fact of the matter is, if you're sitting here thinking, man, that's cool, I'd like to be able to go to the gym in the morning, or I'd like to really be able to focus on learning how to smoke a perfect brisket, but I don't have time for those things. You're doing yourself a disservice because that's total bullcrap. You just have to be intentional.
Absolutely. We did an episode, I think it was like episode 7, maybe, where we talked about destroying excuses. And then we also just did an episode, our last episode was about unlocking your personal code of conduct. And those two things really intersect here in the sense of there's a man you want to be. There's a certain amount of personal development that you need to prioritize. Again, whether it's the gym on a daily basis, whether it's maybe a trip, time spent learning, reading, etc., that will help you achieve that man that you designed in your code of conduct. So you need to learn how to destroy those excuses and become that man. There's no reason that you need to have an excuse to not work out, for instance. I don't care if you're going to the gym for an hour a day or if you're going to sit there and just go, you know what, all I can squeeze in is, a set of 25 burpees, 25 push-ups, and 25 air squats. If you're doing something every day to move that needle forward, then you're prioritizing yourself. Same for your education. If you're reading for just 10 pages a day, I don't care. As long as it's something that's going to move the needle forward and make you a better person, a better man, then you're working towards that code of conduct and you're prioritizing yourself to an extent. We're not talking necessarily about these large-scale, huge things, but we are talking about taking time out of your day to do the things that you need to do to make you a better man. And yes, you can do some of it with the people around you. And yes, sometimes you have to remove yourself from that situation to get it done. Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head before with that. So
yeah, I'll tell you, there are fruits to be born if you prioritize yourself.
Yeah.
Like as a personal example, look, 2018 was, I kind of consider that year. We might have talked about that year on this podcast, but I've talked to you about it personally. 2018 for me was rock bottom. I was a nice guy who didn't have anything in my life figured out, who was living a life of dishonesty. I was overweight. I was constantly tired. I never made time for myself to do much of anything aside from like an occasional guy's trip to go watch a football game or maybe go to the gym once every couple of weeks. That at that time is when I started to make a conscious effort to wake myself up at 5:30 in the morning every day to go to the gym. Started there. I made that time for myself. That was my sacred hour in the morning. It was hard at first. And then that sacredness extended to me reading a book and journaling every time I was on the train commuting to work. Those were a couple baby steps, right? That also included me having conversations with my wife about, various trips, hikes, activities that I wanted to do. I talked to her that I wanted to get a bow. I talked to her that I was going to get another gun and that these were things that really interested me. And making that time for myself then and creating that routine then has laid the groundwork for where I am now. Since 2018, I've more than doubled my salary. I am now in considerably better shape and in the best shape of my life. I am in leadership professionally and personally, various places in my life. I am present as a husband, as a father, and I'm still spending all this time doing these things for myself. But it's because I'm doing so with intentionality and making sure that my home time is sacred and that there are ways to be able to be very focused when I focus on myself that I've been able to execute. I look now, yeah, you could say I've got all those things going on. I talked to you earlier about all those things I have going on. I still have free time to do things and be there for my family and be present for them, simply because I've made the time to be intentional around prioritizing myself, and it's turned my life upside down. That man in 2018 that would look at the man that I am now would be shocked, and he'd probably be pretty pumped up to see what he became, because what he was not happy with himself.
I remember that guy in 2018 when I first met you. So, or 2019 maybe it was when I first met you.
It was
but
2020. Yeah. Same diff. I was middle of the journey at the time.
You were still early, yeah. And it's definitely seen that. But I've got a very similar situation. When my kids were little, when they were little, I would spend a lot of time away at the gym, and I told myself I was making myself a better father. I was escaping the torture of twin 3-year-olds.
Oh man, that would have been wild.
And I don't even think I realized that I was doing it then. But looking back, I absolutely was. And it's something that I'm ashamed of, but whatever. It happened, and I have to get over it at this point. I was escaping that. And then at some point in probably the same time frame, the late 20 teens, I started to grasp the idea of I need to be very present for my family, but at the same time, I need to be very present for myself. And you can have that dichotomy. You can be present for both things and manage your time. And it's been a journey since then to balance that out. We talked before about the conversations I just had with my wife about, okay, these are the things I'm looking at doing. These are the things the family wants to do. How do we kind of balance this system out so that everyone kind of gets a little bit of what they need? And there's a give and take. But it's about being mentally present in both areas and making sure that you take the time to think about yourself as well as take the time to think about your wife, your kids, your family, your work, and all that stuff. I can't begin to describe how much better of a father I have become, how much better of a husband I have become since I consciously took the effort to prioritize growth and in myself.
Yeah. It turns everything upside down when you really...
It does. It changes things. Hell, so just to give you a quick story, I think I told you this the other day, but I got 13-year-old daughters now. My wife went out to a concert on a town common with one of them the other night and with a bunch of the other moms and their daughters. And she comes back and she's like, I got to tell you a story. She goes, so the girls are out and they're running around, being 13-year-olds. She goes, we look over and she goes, and they're with a group of boys. She goes, they're starting to chase boys around now. So she goes, none of the moms are supposed to know, all this stuff. I said, okay, no problem. My daughter completely talked to us about the situation. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but for a 13-year-old girl to talk to her father about boys, all right, I'm doing something right in life. And that's because I've prioritized both myself and my time with my family. So, yeah, I'm patting myself on the back a little bit here right now. But you know what? That to me is a huge win. I don't know how many of my friends who have daughters this age can say that their kids will come to them and talk to them about, that part of their life.
That's awesome, man.
And it's because of the prioritization in myself, which has translated into being a more present father and husband and understanding how to relate to them through self-reflection.
So that's awesome, man. And that's something your daughters look up to you. And there's been something that's been floating around the back of my head this entire conversation, and I wasn't sure how to incorporate it in. But you look at that, your daughters look at you, how you've been able to prioritize your life, and in turn be able to prioritize them, and how awesome and beautiful that is. And the juxtaposition of that against this thing I've been thinking about of, I have a friend he's a big guy, really big guy, and he makes no time for himself. He never has. He has a good job, but he's also 350 pounds. He has his hobbies and interests are eating and hanging out on the couch. And I was going through Facebook the other day and I saw him post a profile picture with him having a t-shirt that said Dad Bod on it. And it pissed me off, man. I was like, that pissed me off. You wear that as if it's a joke, but that's not a badge of honor. Your kids are going to look at you and realize you're not prioritizing yourself. And what sort of impact is that going to have on your kids? What sort of impact does that have on the men around you? If somebody that's a friend of yours sees that and, Inherently the first thing he feels is pissed off because he sees that. What sort of messaging is that sending? And you compare that to your situation with your daughter feeling that way. You look at me, one of the things that I find so interesting is how many other men will talk to me and they'll be like, "Oh, you do jujitsu? Oh, you ride a bike? Oh, you're reading that book? That's awesome, man. Those are things I've wanted to do." Like, why haven't you? Like, we can become inspirational, and in some ways, men can look at us and aspire to be more like us if we simply do the work. And that's what this is all about. It's not just about us. We want to lift up all men. So by prioritizing ourselves, we're lifting up those around us as well.
It's also about setting the example, right? Yeah, I mean, you're lifting people up around you, but you're also setting an example. So I have conversations at work all the time. We'll do something crazy like 75 hard, or we'll do some challenge or whatever. And I'll have those conversations at work with some of the guys I work with. I'm like, well, why are you doing this? And I'll start to explain it. And you can see the light bulb start to flicker a little bit. You're maybe not getting them onto the path right away, but you're laying that groundwork. And by just being present, being conscious of your decisions, you're affecting people around you more than you think. And this is probably a good conversation for another podcast about how to help other men get on the path without browbeating them to do it. But I think in general, we're setting that expectation. To your point about my kids, though, I am also setting the expectation that their future husbands are not going to be the kind of guys who completely dote on them and don't take care of themselves as well. They see that my wife is, by every stretch of the imagination, the apple of my eye, and I don't just live to serve her, right? They understand that my wife is the biggest priority in my life, and I still make time for myself to do the things that I need to do to make me a better man, husband, father, etc. And that sets the expectation in them that they need to be strong women who can both take care of themselves and still have a man in their life who is strong, capable of leading, but also spends time on himself. And that to me is an important thing. I do not want them expecting a guy that they can trample over, and I do not want them expecting a guy who is going to spend all his time on himself and none on theirs. So there's that balance that not only am I doing it for me and my wife, but I'm also doing it to set the example for my children.
It's awesome. That's what it's all about. That's that example goes back to that. I don't know what else. There's that's a perfect summation.
I mean, I think this is probably a great place to wrap it up. We've gone down a couple of rabbit holes, and I think there's a couple of podcast ideas in here for the future, for sure. But the prime message that I want to get to guys is that not only is it okay, but it's imperative that you spend time on yourself, improving yourself in different aspects of life. And if that means spending time by yourself or with a group of men as opposed to with your families, and that you take time off of work, not only is that okay, but it's almost required in order to make you a stronger man. Any closing thoughts on your end?
Just that it makes you a stronger man. I don't know. That was such a good line. One thing I want to let you guys know is that when you do the work, other people notice. Mm-hmm. As Dan just shared, his wife notices, his daughters notice. I can't tell you how many friends and colleagues that I've had for a long time, going back years, who come up to me and just, when they're ready, as Dan talked about earlier, sometimes you kind of plant that seed, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had men reach out to me and say, "Hey, Brad, I'd love to know what you did to get in shape. I would love to know how you laid that groundwork to get where you are. I'd love to know what you did with your job," because they've seen that evolution inside of me. And it all started with me prioritizing.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more with that. Thanks, Brad. I think this was an awesome conversation. I think the guys are going to get a lot out of this. For you guys who are listening, if you've got ideas about prioritization or questions, hit us up on social media. You can find Brad and I's Instagram handles and Twitter accounts on our website at untamingmasculinity.com. You can also find show notes for this episode and all of our other episodes there. We'll link the couple of episodes that we mentioned here in the show notes for this episode, so you can go back and listen to those as well as all the other ones. And other than that, all we ask is that if you thought this was valuable, you go to your podcast player and you leave a 5-star rating and review. not just the rating, but the review really helps get us out there and gets us seen by all the other men who need to hear this message. So once again, Brad, thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time. And for the fellas, thanks for listening. Make sure you come back next week. Until then, we'll leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?